Hi, I'm Fraser Douglas, the avid tent camper, and in this video I want to discuss a few ethical issues that are related to tent camping in developed campgrounds. In the early 1900s, camping books and discussions typically focused on woodcraft. In other words, they spent a lot of space explaining how campers could use their axes and saws to cut trees and make shelters, bedding, and other camp implements. But public land managers soon realized that these woodcraft practices and other destructive practices were slowly destroying our parks and wilderness areas here in the United States. Visitors to parks and other public lands wrote graffiti on historic buildings, on trees, and on scenic overlooks. They built large bonfires wherever they wanted and scorched the ground under these fires, and sometimes let these fires get out of control. They were throwing tons of trash onto the ground, cutting trees and vegetation to make trails and roads, and engaging in a variety of other destructive behaviors. In the 1960s and 1970s, several influential American writers began to emphasize the importance of preserving our parks and natural resources. And as a result, most state and federal campgrounds developed a list of specific rules that campers should obey while camping in those campgrounds. The list of rules vary somewhat from campground to campground, but all of the lists contain certain common rules that are intended to prevent problems that have frequently occurred in the past. The first rule is to pay the proper fee for the campsite. Now, I shouldn't have to say anything about this, but I'm aware of the fact that some campers will arrive at self-registration campgrounds late in the night. They'll set up camp, claiming that they're going to pay the fee in the morning, but leave early and not pay the fee. One of the newest rules to be adopted by many state and federal campgrounds around the country involves firewood. Specifically, this rule usually states that campers cannot bring in untreated firewood that was cut more than 25 or 30 miles away from the campground. The reason for this rule is that some firewood has pests, and these pests can be released into a healthy forest when the firewood is burned. Another new rule that's quickly being adopted by state and federal park campgrounds around the country is the prohibition of possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages. This rule is being adopted because alcoholic beverages have been associated with numerous problems in campgrounds over the past 50 years. Some of these problems include playing radios too loud, vulgarity, public urination, reckless driving, arguments, and fighting. Another common campground rule is a speed limit of 5 to 10 miles an hour. The reason for this rule is to protect adults that may be walking or riding their bicycles in the road, and children that ride their bicycles in the road or run impulsively into the road. Here are some other common campground rules. You might note in particular that quiet hours are usually defined in every campground as being between 10 or 11 o'clock at night and 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. This rule was written to allow campers to sleep peacefully all night long without being disturbed by loud car engines, motorcycle motors, campers setting up or taking down camp, or loud radios. I only wish that this rule would also prohibit RV owners from running their heaters and air conditioners all night long. And here are a few more common campground rules. One last common rule is that pet owners should always keep their pets on a leash so that they don't disturb other campers, and always pick up their poop and dispose it in garbage containers. Another approach to preserving federal parks and wilderness areas, called the Leave No Trace program, began to grow within the U.S. Department of Agriculture during the 1960s and 1970s. This approach emphasized developing 7 broad principles of public land use and then recruiting all users to become advocates for these 7 principles. This program was formally implemented in 1994, but land managers soon realized that most of the examples applied to backpacking and backcountry camping and did not seem to apply as well to front country camping and day hiking. So around 2015, they modified these 7 principles, but these modifications still seem to apply more to day hiking than to front country camping. And so I will add a little more information that applies specifically to camping and developed state and federal campgrounds. The first principle is plan ahead and prepare. To comply with this principle, basic tent campers need to go to the park's webpage and read rules and regulations, and be prepared to comply with these rules and regulations. If the park says don't move firewood or alcoholic beverages prohibited, the camper needs to be prepared to comply with those rules. Basic tent campers should also determine the best way to secure a campsite in that particular campground and follow those procedures. The second principle is travel and camp on durable surfaces. Basic tent campers will need to set up their entire camp, including parking their vehicle, within the limits of the campsite. If an elevated tent pad is provided, set your tent up on the pad. Don't set up camp in buffer zones beyond the limit of your campsite. And when you need to go to the bathroom or to the store or to the beach, stay on paved roads and designated trails. The third principle is dispose of waste properly. In our campsite, we usually have a plastic bag for our trash and a bucket for our soapy water. At night before we go to bed and whenever we leave our campsite, we either take our trash to the dumpster or we store it in the car. We try to pour our soapy water in appropriate gray water disposal stations. Some campgrounds have disposal areas. Other campgrounds suggest that you pour it down the toilet. And never throw your trash in the fire ring. When the time comes to pack up and go home, police your campsite and pick up all trash, whether you yourself dropped it or a previous camper dropped it. Be sure to pick up cigarette butts, pop can tops, and beer can tops. The fourth principle is leave what you find. In particular, basic tent campers should not cut flowers, write graffiti on objects within the campsite, move major objects around the campsite, or take souvenirs home. In other words, leave the campsite exactly as you found it. Although the Leave No Trace guidelines specifically forbid digging trenches, I suggest that this practice may be acceptable on some gravel-filled campsites and developed campgrounds. The fifth principle is minimize use and impacts of fire. In developed campgrounds, basic tent campers need to first determine if fires are permissible. If they are permissible, then they need to confine their fire to the fire ring and not move the fire ring, and they should keep their fire small. The sixth principle is respect wildlife. In particular, Do not feed wildlife. Do not leave pet food out where they can get it. Do not throw food scraps on the ground, and keep your food locked inside your car at all times except when you're preparing it for a meal or eating it. Campers should prevent animal access to their food because human food can make animals sick, because animals that get food handouts from humans may not learn how to get it in the wild on their own, and because wild animals will become aggressive toward humans when they learn that humans may give them food. When large animals become aggressive toward humans, they may have to be put down. Furthermore, campers should not chase animals or birds or allow their dogs to chase animals and birds, and they should not attempt to catch or kill snakes. Now, I contend that this sixth guideline should also say respect vegetation. Campers should not cut trees, carve their initials into them, drive nails into them, throw knives at them, or throw axes at them. They should also take care not to damage trees with clotheslines and hammocks. At the end of their camp, they should be sure and remove all ropes and straps from trees in their campsite. The seventh and final guideline is be considerate of other visitors. Some specific suggestions include smile and speak to your neighbors when you see them. Be quiet at all time, not just during quiet hours. Be helpful if your neighbors need assistance. Help to keep bathrooms clean. Return found property or take it to the lost and found department. And never walk through your neighbor's campsite on the way to the bathroom, to the park store, or some other destination. Before concluding, let me just add that ethical tent campers should also become aware of pressing environmental issues. They should try to conserve water by taking shorter baths and not throwing good drinking water on the ground. They should try to reduce their use of carbon fuels by spending more time outdoors, using less heat, using less air conditioning, and driving fewer miles. Rather than throwing old clothing and camping equipment away, try to repair it, continue to use it for at least 20 years, or donate it to youth organizations. And finally, try to buy green or eco-friendly clothing and camping gear and support other companies that have strong environmental friendly policies. Well, I hope this video gives you a better understanding of ethical issues related to tent camping and encourages you to become an advocate for the preservation of our tent camping destinations across the United States. Remember, take more trips, travel further, visit more attractions, and save money. Go tent camping.